It was the year 1580. The Jews of Prague were at that time leading a thorny existence. The hand of the Catholic ecclesiastics weighed heavily upon them. One priest especially, Thaddeus by name. Rabbi Lowe therefore considered it necessary to have a conference with the ecclesiastics in order to convince them of the baseness of all those accusations against the Jews. But the fanatical priest Thaddeus continued to attempt mischief. Thaddeus strained every nerve to succeed in bringing forward a ritual murder charge against the Jews of Prague. Rabbi Lowe learned of this in time and directed a dream question to heaven, asking to be counseled as to the manner and means wherewith to combat this wicked foe. He received the following answer:
"Make a golem of clay, and you will destroy the entire Jew-baiting company."
Rabbi Lowe sent for his son-in-law, Isaac ben Simson, and for his student, Jacob ben Chaim Sasson, and confided to them the mysterious manner in which he hoped to be able to make the golem. Rabbi Lowe said,
"I wish to make a golem, and I bespeak your collaboration because for this creative act the 4 elements, fire, water, air, and earth, are necessary. You, Isaac, are the element of fire. You, Jacob, are the element of water. I myself am air. Working together, we shall make out of the 4th element, earth, a golem."
They formed out of clay the figure of a person, and the golem lay before them with his face turned toward heaven. It lay there like a dead body, without any movement. The clay body became red, like fire. The fire was extinguished, and water flowed through the clay body. Hair sprouted on its head, and nails appeared on the fingers and toes. Then Rabbi Lowe himself walked once around the figure, placed in its mouth a piece of parchment inscribed with the name of God, and bowing to the east and to the west and the south and the north, all 3 recited together, "And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." The golem opened his eyes and looked astonished about him. And Rabbi Lowe said to him,
"Stand up."
And he stood up. Only the faculty of speech was lacking to him. At daybreak, 4 men went homeward. On the way, Rabbi Lowe thus addressed the golem:
"Know that we have formed you from a clod of earth. It will be thy task to protect the Jews from persecution. You shall be called Joseph. You, Joseph, must obey my commands."
Joseph nodded in acceptance. The golem became the terror of the enemies of the Jews. Rabbi Lowe used to order him to do nothing else on Sabbath but to be on guard and serve as a watcher. One Friday afternoon, Rabbi Lowe forgot to give him the order for the next day. The want of employment made him awkward and wild. When the people saw this, they ran from him and cried, "Joseph Golem has gone mad!" The people were greatly terrified, and a report of the panic soon reached the Altanu synagogue where Rabbi Lowe was praying. Rabbi Lowe rushed out, and without seeing the golem, called out into space, "Joseph, stop where you are!" And the people saw the golem at the place where he had happened to find himself that moment remain standing like a post. Rabbi Lowe sent for his son-in-law, Rabbi Yitzhak, the priest, and his disciple Jacob Sasson, the Levite, those who had participated in the creation of the golem. And he said to them,
"We will therefore destroy the golem."
It was on Lag BaOmer, the year 1593. They ascended to the top of the Altanu synagogue, the assistant, Abraham Chaim, walking in advance with 2 burning candles. The 3 men began their work, the annihilation of the golem. In the morning, news spread in the Jewish ghetto that Joseph Golem had disappeared from the town during the night. Rabbi Lowe had it announced in all synagogues and houses of prayer that it was strictly forbidden for anybody to mount to the top of the Altanu synagogue. Furthermore, the remains of torn prayer books and other sacred things were no longer to be stored there. The rabbis had no problem thinking about demons, and actually, they went so far as to talk about demons in the Talmud itself. And this is what they wrote.
It has been taught, Abba Benjamin says, if the eye had the power to see them, no creature could endure the demons. Abaye says,
They are more numerous than we are, and they surround us like the ridge around a field. Rabbi Huna says,
every one among us has 1,000 on his left hand and 10,000 on his right hand. Rabbi says,
the crushing of the crowd in the Kala lectures comes from them. Fatigue in the knees comes from them. The wearing out of the clothes of the scholars is due to their rubbing against them.
The bruising of the feet comes from them. Rarely does the Talmudic literature go into detail about exactly how demons and magical creatures come into being, or whether they are really independent beings out there, or merely psychological realities. If the latter, of course, then we today can perhaps understand this foreign-sounding discourse. After all, who among us has not been plagued by demons in their work or sexual life? As in the source above, demons could be seen as anything that causes decay, pain, and the depletion of life energy. If one wants to discover them, let him take sifted ashes and sprinkle around his bed, and in the morning he will see something like the footprints of a rooster.
nothing scarier than the footprints of a rooster in the morning. So you can see that the rabbis believed that we were surrounded by demons at all times, always watching us, tempting us. But that's not all. Cantor Lisa, what else?
We not only find those stories in the Talmud, we also find stories of demons in the Midrash. The rabbis attempt to understand why horrible things happen in this world. And one of the things that they seek to explain is the confusing fact that in Genesis, in the creation story, there are two stories of creation. So in Genesis Rabbah, the rabbis have to explain why there are two different stories. And they come up with a Midrash that Adam had a first wife, and her name was Lilith. God created a mate for Adam, but Adam said that she had to be subservient and lay beneath him. Lilith protested, saying that she was made by the same creator. We are equal, male and female, and so she decides to run away. Adam complains to God, and God sends 3 angels after to bring her back. Lilith refuses to return. She refuses to be subservient to Adam. And her punishment is that if she stays away, that 100 children will die every day because of her, except the ones that have the sign, the amulet of those 3 angels. Those she had no control over. So in the rabbinic mindset, Lilith becomes the demon, the scapegoat for why horrible things happen in this world, why infants die, why women have miscarriages, why marriages fall apart. In their imagination, the cause is Lilith and her demons lurking behind the scenes, stealing babies in the middle of the night. I don't know if anyone received a red ribbon for their crib when they had a baby, but the reason behind this is the red ribbon is supposed to be a sign of one of those amulets so that Lilith can pass over the crib and leave your children undisturbed. But the rabbis imagined that in every bad circumstance, that it's Adam's spurned wife, that first wife of Lilith, that's constantly lurking within the shadows. Rabbi Joel, do you have another one?
It wasn't just birds and bees and beautiful creatures created during the creation of the world. No. There was another creature that was also created at the beginning, supposedly on the 5th day, according to the Midrash. And that would be the Leviathan. Now, the Leviathan had a partner on land. It was called the Behemoth, or the Behemoth. But the Leviathan is special. It comes from the root to coil, to this idea of it was a snake-like creature. But more than what it does when it survives and lives now is what's going to happen in the Messianic era. Oh, that's where it gets really weird. According to the Midrash, when the Messianic time comes, that is when God will slay the Leviathan, and all the people who have made it to the Messianic era will enjoy a feast of Leviathan meat. But that's not all. Cantor Lisa, what else does our tradition teach us?
So now we're going to travel a little bit further into the Middle Ages, into Europe. In Jewish mythology, a dybbuk, taken from the Hebrew verb dabak, which means to cling to or adhere to, is a malicious spirit that is believed to be dislocated from the heavenly world and instead wanders around the earth, hovering around the earth, waiting to find a host that it can possess. Many times these demons have something that they did wrong in their lifetime, and they need to undo the wrong in order to move on from the spiritual realm. The term dybbuk derived from the Hebrew expression of ruach hamedabek, the spirit who cleaves to, and it was first used in 18th century Europe. Previously, this term ruach ra, evil spirit, was used for designating the deceased soul. But there were a number of Hasidism who actually believed, and there's actual accounts in Prague in the 15th century, that there were exorcisms, Jewish exorcisms of people who had been possessed by these dybbuks. There was a play by S. Ansky, which was turned into a Yiddish silent film that's called The Dybbuk. And it's about a young girl who on her wedding night is possessed by the dead spirit of an admirer from her past. And she has to fight the demons. We're watching a clip of this right now. This is the dance of death in which that dybbuk is about to enter into her soul. And by the end of the movie, there has to be a little exorcism. So I was so fascinated by this idea of the dybbuk. And if you search online, there's actual things called dybbuk boxes, and they're thought to hold the spirits of the deceased. So I got this box off of Amazon out of curiosity. And if you look really closely, you can see the words of the Shema written. Just kidding, I couldn't resist that one. But that's the story of the dybbuk. Rabbi Joel, do we have some more frightful tales?
A few weeks ago in the Torah, we learned about a special creature. A creature that existed before the flood. The Nephilim. In early Genesis, right before the story of Noah and the flood, a race of giants is said to have dwelt in the Canaanite land. And these sons of God, these divine angelic beings, took mortal wives. As it says in Genesis 6:4, it was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth when the divine beings cohabitated with the daughters of men who bore them offspring. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown. And in apocryphal writings of the Second Temple period, this narrative was elaborated and reinterpreted, and the idea was that the angels were depicted as rebels against God, and they were lured to the charms of women, of course, and they fell and defiled the Nephal. Nephilim is to fall, Nephal. They defiled their heavenly purity and introduced all manners of sinfulness onto the earth, especially with the ways in which they were interacting with the females on the earth. And so their giant offspring were wicked and violent. And according to these apocryphal texts, the flood came about because of their sinfulness. It's because of the Nephilim that the flood actually happened. But therefore God wanted to destroy the world, get rid of the Nephilim, and start all over again. So that's the story of the Nephilim.
And last but not least, we have one of my favorite stories from the canon of the Hebrew Bible. From the book of 1 Samuel, we have Saul and the Witch of Endor.
In the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 28,
Saul, the first king of Israel, seeks the help of a sorceress from the land of Endor to conjure up the dead spirit of his great mentor, the prophet Samuel. With the younger and stronger David coming up in the ranks behind him, an upcoming battle with the Philistines, Saul felt unsure and lacked the confidence he needed, and so in desperation, he turned to the dark arts. On a dark, dark night, much like tonight, King Saul said to his men, "Find me a sorceress, that I may go to her and inquire of her." Even though God had clearly commanded his people never to consult a witch or a sorcerer, Saul was desperate and thought little of God's commandments. His servants went out and found a woman, a witch, in the nearby woods of the land of Endor, who was known to raise the dead from their graves. In the dead of night, the king took off his kingly garments and disguised himself and went to see the witch of Endor himself. Saul approached the medium. "Consult a spirit for me, and bring up for me the one whom I name to you." The witch replied, "Surely you know what King Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the wizards from the land. So why would you try to cause me to die?" Saul replied, "I swear to you, God will not punish you. I swear to you." "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Samuel." The witch went through her spells and enchantments until a figure of a man wrapped in cloaks appeared before Saul. The witch cried out, realizing that she had risen from the dead, the great prophet Samuel. She cried out in a loud voice, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul!" The shadowy figure walked towards the witch of Endor, saying, "Don't be afraid." Saul, afraid, scrambling and unable to see in the darkness. "What do you see?" The woman replied, I see an old man coming up. He is wrapped in a robe." Saul fell upon the ground, too afraid to show his face to Samuel. "I am in great distress. The Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more." The shadowy figure of Samuel snapped back, "Why are you bothering me? You didn't listen to me when I was alive. You've never listened to God. Why are you bothering me now? Your kingdom will be given to David. Israel will be defeated by the Philistines, and come tomorrow, your sons will be with me." Saul, terrified of Samuel's words, fell to the ground ashamed and began to weep as the shadowy figure disappeared into the air. The following day the battle began, and both of Saul's sons were killed by the Philistine army, just as Saul and the witch had predicted. Seeing the destruction of his family and his soldiers and the loss of Israel's battle, the cursed and now wounded King Saul fell upon his sword and took his own life.